sorry that all of this happened. I feel horrible that the mother and that their family has been affected so horribly by this.
A former youth counselor is going to prison for sexually abusing a 13-year-old boy. The teen's heartbroken mother is now speaking out after Payton Shires apologized in court. We're going to break down what both women had to say with former sex crimes prosecutor Sarena Townsend. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. 24-year-old Payton Shires is headed to prison for possibly the next several years and will be required to register as a sex offender. The now disgraced social worker, who was supposed to be helping a 13-year-old boy, was actually grooming and sexually assaulting him instead. Shires entered a guilty plea in May to multiple counts of unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, as well as intimidation of a victim or witness and inducing panic. Prosecutors actually dropped an intimidation and discharge of a firearm charge as part of this plea agreement. That was when Shires allegedly went over to the boy's house and threatened to kill the boy's mother. We'll get into that in a second. But last week, Shires was sentenced to more than 4 years in prison, has to register as a sex offender every 6 months for the next 25 years. I want to talk about this case, and I want to bring in right now former sex crimes prosecutor Sarena Townsend. Sarena, good to see you. Thanks very much for coming back in person here on Sidebar. What's your reaction to this sentence, this plea deal? Because she could have gotten a lot more prison time.
She absolutely could have gotten a lot more prison time. I think the sentence is low for what she's accused of doing. The fact that the prosecution was willing to drop the charge regarding the firearm is a really big deal, because it's one thing to have committed a crime, a horrific crime at that, and it's another thing to then go to a potential witness's home and threaten that person. It's bad enough to do that with a gun anyway, but when that person is a witness to something that you've done bad before, it just makes things way worse.
Wouldn't you agree that I think in these kinds of cases, the goal of the prosecution is maybe not to take this to trial, because you're then dealing with the testimony of a young victim, and they're going to try to avoid that at all costs. So if they can get her locked behind bars for years to come, not necessarily that she'll get released early, and we'll talk about that, isn't that a win?
There's so many reasons why prosecutors do or do not give a plea offer in a case. As you just mentioned, one of the biggest reasons to take into consideration is how it's going to affect the victim in the case to have to testify. We see it all of the time where a victim is already, in such a bad mental state, the trauma is horrific, and going to trial and having that victim have to take the stand only reopens those wounds. I am sure that the prosecution took into account the victim's mental stability and the trauma that it would cause to have him have to testify against her. Sometimes when that happens, you do see lower plea deals.
Now, it was reported that the judge told her that with good behavior, she could be released within 18 months, which is crazy to think about because, again, my understanding is the max was, 28 years in this case? So the idea that she could be released within 18 months, what do you think the probability of that happening is?
Look, I think actually the probability could be quite high. This is a young woman with no criminal history. She has a young child herself. And so I think that there's some sympathy there. I'm not saying that there should be necessarily, but I do think that with no record and some mitigation that she has, it's possible that she gets out early. And that's why I'm saying it feels like a very short sentence for what she had done. I mean, this was a child that she had sex with, and it sounded like they actually had pretty decent proof. Remember that in sex crimes, so often you don't really have hard evidence. You have the victim and what they say happened. You oftentimes have, what we call an outcry witness, a parent, a therapist, something of that nature, somebody who heard what happened but not saw. Here, there was actual proof in the fact that there was video and text messages. So it just feels like the case was very, very strong, and perhaps they had a pretty decent case to give to a jury and then end up with a pretty high sentence if they won at trial.
And talk to me about when she is released and is registered as a sex offender. What does that mean? What limits are put on her life? What protections are put in place from society so that she can't be put in a position to allegedly or seemingly do this again?
Yeah, I think there has to be vetting in general, even before
Sure.
somebody is put on a
I mean, this will
sex
go on a
offender
record.
registry.
It'll go on a record. Right?
Exactly, it will. It'll be on her record. So any potential job opportunity she has, as long as they do their due diligence, they'll find that on her record. Sex offender registration is public, so you don't even need those extra tools or investigatory software to find out that she is a sex offender. So you could basically just Google her or go on any sex offender registry and she'll be on it. So there's a restriction there. I mean, probably the areas where she's allowed to live, the types of work she's allowed to do, all of those things will be restricted because of her sex offender status.
Is there any way for her to shorten the sex offender status, or is that once it's set in stone, it's set in stone?
There are sometimes ways to appeal later on down the road and ask for some sort of shortening of that time period.
Even if she pled guilty?
Correct, but oftentimes it does not work. Usually you have to do the full time that's set out for you.
Stories like this one, they make you ask, how well do you know the people you surround yourself with, right? Well, that's why I want to talk about Truthfinder, the sponsor of this episode. So Truthfinder is a service that can maybe provide some answers because it is one of the largest public records search services in the United States. You go on their website, truthfinder.com, you type in a name, and within minutes and a paid subscription purchase, you can access unlimited reports that could include information like phone numbers, location history, criminal and traffic records, including possible arrests and criminal convictions. And if you type in an address within that report, you can see registered sex offenders that may live in that area. Well, right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports at truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. I want to explore a few more points about this case for a second. So Payton Shires, she had a fiance. She's a mother to a 4-year-old. She was living in Columbus, Ohio, like Sarena and I were talking about, and she had gotten her social work license in the summer of 2023 and worked with the National Youth Advocate Program, which paired foster children and other kids with counseling and support. But let me emphasize that just one more time. These were children who needed help and care. Now, Shires was quickly fired after these allegations came to light that she might have been having an inappropriate relationship with a teenager. Last September, the victim's mother found text messages on his phone, allegedly from Shires, that indicated there was something not right going on between the two of them. And according to court documents, Shires had asked the boy if he had deleted the videos and whether his mom had found them. So the victim's mother reported the messages to Columbus police. They did a forensic evaluation of the boy's cell phone, and they found text messages and a video of Shires and the boy engaging in sexual conduct. Police, though, went a step further. They had the boy's mother do a 3-way phone call with Shires, who apparently admitted to the conduct. So she was arrested. She was able to post a reported $50,000 bond. And that is when, as we were talking about before, Shires reportedly went to the boy's home with a gun. She threatened the boy's mother at one point. That's the allegation. And now the gun did go off. No one was hurt. Shires was arrested by police at the home. Officers found her on the front porch with a gun to her head. She had threatened to harm herself. The boy was not home, but Shires reportedly had talked to him on the phone, saying he and his family had ruined her life by reporting her. He ruined her life. And her bond was revoked after that incident. Now, I want to tell you that Shires gave a statement in court last week. This is before the judge handed down the sentence. Let's listen.
I'm really sorry that all of this happened. I feel horrible that the mother and that their family has been affected so horribly by this and by my actions. I was not thinking rationally at the time that I showed up to the mother's house. I was extremely suicidal. I never had intentions to harm anybody but myself, and I'm just thankful that she took the right steps to call the police, and she saved my life that day. I just feel horrible for the mistakes that I made in the social worker-client relationship. I cared for him, I wanted to support him, but my lack of boundaries caused severe mistakes to be made. I'm praying for the family. I've been praying for the family since I've been in jail, and I just hope that they can heal from this. I hope that they can find peace and gain trust with other social workers in the future. And I'm hoping that this doesn't affect how he views women in relationships in the future, and that he can get the help that he needs and have a healthy relationship with his mother.
So, Sarena, what do you make of that response?
It's interesting. It sounds like her initial response of blaming everybody else for her problems was her true feelings, and that this might have been kind of a canned statement that was potentially written by both herself and her defense attorney to gain sympathy. It did not feel like she was very remorseful with her initial statement, blaming everybody else for her actions, her horrific actions, mind you. These kinds of things affect victims for their entire lives. And it's really awful, especially when the person committing the crime is somebody who's supposed to be in a position of trust, supposed to be in a position where they gain access to potentially a troubled child or somebody seeking help, and they use their manipulative powers for evil, essentially. What happens with a victim is people in the future that they meet, people that they encounter in the future, they're not going to be able to trust. It's hard enough to, go through this kind of thing with somebody that you don't know, a stranger, or, somebody who's you just seemingly encounter. And very opposite to that, it's so much more difficult to be taken advantage of by a person that you came to for help.
And it'll affect their relationships in general, their ability to have a stable relationship, enter into a marriage, right? You've seen that
Sure.
in your experience. I want to emphasize that again because you really laid it out quite well. Sometimes there's a misconception in cases when you have a female teacher or educator or instructor or a social worker and a young boy, that it's almost, I don't know the best way to say it, but it's almost okay. It's almost like, wow, and it's applauded. And that's the really, not only a disgusting way of looking at it, it's a harmful way to look at it, right?
It is. These kinds of things should be looked at just as horrifically as if the genders were swapped. This is a 13-year-old child. This isn't even somebody close to adulthood.
Right.
And again, this child was relying on this woman to help him. Social workers have the ability to manipulate people in a good way, right? To try to get you to think differently, to help yourself, to make your life better, to think differently about yourself in a more positive way. And here she is in her position of power, in her position of manipulation, using it to benefit herself and enter into this horrific sexual encounter, multiple sexual encounters.
Let's listen a little bit more to what else she had to say.
I know that I messed up my bond and I lost trust with the courts, but I'm in a much better headspace now, and I'm going to continue to be. But I'm very sorry to everyone involved, and I wish that I could change the past, but all I can do moving forward is work on myself and heal. So I just hope that the family can also do that and find peace.
So Sarena, what's your reaction to that? Because I think a lot of people could look at that and say it's more about her well-being, right? And also, is it believable that this incident happened only last year, right? And to have that 180 and realize, what I did was bad. It doesn't usually take that. I mean, maybe people are different, but does it seem suspicious that they have that 180 about their conduct? I would imagine if you're going to engage in this kind of behavior, it might take years for you to understand what you have done.
Oh, absolutely. I think that it's way too soon for her to have actually found remorse and understanding of the damage that she did to this entire family and especially to the victim. It sounds just very convenient for her to say these things right before she's about to be sentenced and her fate is to be decided. I think she will learn in time. I don't know if her feelings will change, but she certainly will get the punishment, hopefully, that she deserved here, because she's going to have to, I assume, go to some programs, and she herself is going to have to seek therapy and do better and learn about what she caused with her selfish acts.
Well, the judge called out Shires for her behavior. Let's listen.
I'm to consider the seriousness of the offense, which is a serious offense. You violated the position of trust that you had. This young man was a child. He was a child. He was 13, 14 years old. That's a child. You're 23, 24 years old when all this was going on. He was trying to get the help that he needed. In some ways, I'm a little I think you're genuine today. I do, and I do hope that you rebound from this eventually. This doesn't have to define you, but it will affect you for the rest of your life, as it should. But I was disappointed in the pre-sentence investigation and that you seem to blame him a little bit for, like, then, you know, trying to trick you and coerce you into having additional sex, blackmailing you, and, you know, you started, the whole incident started, you're the adult, you need to have the boundaries. You're trained professionally to deal with situations like this. You have no record whatsoever. Court takes that into consideration. You also have accepted responsibility and pled guilty by not requiring the young man to come to court and come to trial. Prosecutor has deferred, meaning they're going to leave the sentence up to me. So the sentence is going to be as follows. On counts 1, 2, 3, and 4, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, 2 years each, concurrent to each other. On counts 5 and 6, intimidation of a witness, 9 months consecutive to counts 1 and 4, and consecutive to the inducing panic count, which is, trying to figure out which count that is. At any rate, the inducing panic count, you get 1 year plus 1 year for the firearm specification. That'll be consecutive to the other counts, and consecutive to each other. So the bottom line is you're getting a 4-year and 9-month sentence. Your sentence is 4 years and 9 months to be served at the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections.
So 4 years, 9 months, and again, that part of it's interesting, right? Where the judge highlights that Shires seemed to had put some of the blame on the boy. Do you see that typically?
It's, you know, usually people have a better sense than to say that to probation in their pre-sentence investigation and interview. I think it's really indicative of her mindset. I mean, that to me shows that this was her acting on her best behavior in that interview, and she still could not, you know, take all of the blame herself. How are you going to say that you, especially in a position of power, in a position of manipulation, and your age difference, that you were the one manipulated?
And to be clear, that's never a legal defense, right?
Ever. No. There is no such thing as consensual sex with a 13-year-old when you are 24.
Yeah.
There is no such thing. And so she couldn't even bring herself to come to that conclusion, even in this interview. She couldn't even get there. So for me, I mean, a judge is supposed to look at that pre-sentence investigation very seriously, and they're supposed to kind of glean from it whether she is sorry for what she did, and if there is a way to rehabilitate this person. And if I were the judge, if I were thinking of 4.5 years before viewing that pre-sentence interview, I would have upped it after that.
Well, during the sentencing, there was a statement from the victim's mother that was read in court. Now, by the way, she hasn't been identified, but she said that Shires' actions in this case have had a devastating impact. Quote, "He was manipulated, groomed, and sexually abused by Miss Shires. I regret I ever let you into my house." And the victim's family has also filed a lawsuit against Shires and her former employer, National Youth Advocate Program, or NYAP. And the lawsuit is based on the allegation that this mother reportedly told NYAP about her concerns around Shires' behavior, asked that she be removed from her care. According to the lawsuit, NYAP failed to remove Shires from care, and as a direct result thereof, said failure, the inappropriate sexual relationship continued. In a statement, NYAP denied any wrongdoing and said during the investigation, protecting children is everyone's responsibility. The National Youth Advocate Program is saddened by the situation involving one of our former employees and a young person served by our organization. NYAP has reported the situation to Franklin County Children's Services and is collaborating with them and the Columbus Police Department on this case. And that civil lawsuit should go to trial next year. What are your thoughts on that?
Good for her for bringing the lawsuit, because if she alerted them to Shires' behavior and they did nothing, shame on them and they need to pay for it. No amount of money is going to make this family whole again and this child, you know, reverse the trauma that he experienced. But absolutely, they should seek this lawsuit, and NYAP should have liability here if that is all true. This kind of profession, a social worker, we see it so often. We talk about it a lot. Teachers, right? Yeah. Teachers, clergymen, pediatricians, social workers, people who are seeking out, camp counselors, seeking out positions to work with children, they need to be vetted better. She doesn't have a criminal record, so, but that's just such an easy thing to say, right? Oh, well, she didn't have a criminal record, therefore she's safe. That's not true. We need to vet people, because why are they becoming a pediatrician instead of a dermatologist, right? Why are they seeking to work with young children? Is it because they really care about young children and want to help, or do they have nefarious reasons for it? And NYAP needed to do better vetting beforehand, and certainly once they were alerted, if this is all true, they needed to take steps to remove her from not just this family, but from all families. They needed to do an investigation, and it sounds like they didn't.
What a conclusion to the story. I mean, some of it's still ongoing, and we'll see how much time she actually spends behind bars. But Sarena Townsend, thanks so much for coming on, breaking down the story with me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.